Welcome to the Strategy Mob Podcast. Tune in for everything you need to know to stay in the know regarding the automotive industry. Here's your host, Jason Harris.
Hey, what's going on, Podcast Nation? It is Jason Harris here, and thank you for joining me on another episode of Strategy with Jason. Today, I have a very special guest. We're going to talk all things data, and we're just going to have a really good time. I have the one, the only, the oh-so-famous Mr. Russell Gentry in the house with me. Russell, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Jason, good to be here. Thanks, man.
I don't know why I always try to put this announcer-type voice every time I do these intros, but I guess everybody does it, so I guess it's just a normal thing.
Kind of like the WWE thing, right? Sunday.
Hey, Russell, this is going to be a lot of fun. I think we got some really cool topics. I also think it's very timely that we're doing this podcast because there are some things that are going on in our industry or things that are going to impact our industry in a big way. And I'm so glad that we get a chance to talk about it. But before we kind of get into the depth of our conversation today, I thought it'd be really cool to kick off today's podcast with an origin story. So Russell, how did you get started in this crazy little world we call the automotive industry?
Yeah, so actually it is kind of an interesting journey. I'm a retired battalion chief from the fire department in Cincinnati. And when you work with the fire division, one of my responsibilities was state bid pricing for our cars and pickup trucks and that type of thing. So I always had a really good relationship with most of the dealers in Cincinnati, in particular, the one of the largest Chevy stores and one of the largest Ford stores there. So when I was retiring and cycling out, I was doing the introduction of the individual that was, going to take over my role with the fire division with a particular dealer. And he's like, Russell, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to go on and do this and this. And he said, well, I think you ought to work for us. And I kind of hemmed and hawed around a little bit with it. And he was pretty persistent. So I started basically working with them. Technology, this was in 1997. So CRM, websites, everything was pretty new then, but I was always as a hobby or a sideline and interested in that side of work. And that's what I was going to go on to do. So he had me start evaluating contracts and providers that he was having into the dealership. And lo and behold, I started, connecting with one company in particular, made buddies and friends with them. And even after that little initial thing at the dealership was done and the project, they won me a contract, that type of thing. I got a call a couple weeks later, and hindsight's 2020, but it was with my future business partner of 12 years, and he had gone on to a company in California called AutoWeb, and so he had taken the EVB spot there. He called. He said, "Listen, I think you'd be really good at this." And so I went out and talked with them and started working with AutoWeb in the early days of lead generation.
That was early web. It was almost like web 1.0, wasn't it? What year was that?
Yeah. It was the Dove ice cream bars and the Nerf footballs across the office, and unlimited funding. And AutoWeb did extremely well. I learned a ton. So it was very kind of an accidental, trip into it kind of thing. So AutoWeb continued on, and I progressed up the chain with AutoWeb up to national sales director, and then it was sold to Auto Vitel in 2001. And I was part of a 6-pack package that went with them for national accounts. And so we were down there for about a year with the transition and that type of thing. And then we had always done things with data and lead scrubbing and scoring. And back when there wasn't nearly the resources for dealers that they have today. And it just fascinated me. And that's kind of what transformed me into my next gig, which is we founded 4 companies, and Dealer Vault was one of them, Athenacom, and they were all based around syndication, dealership owner of the data, hygiene, modeling, analytics, and that's kind of how it took off.
Now, I think you were very early on, I think, pioneering data within the dealership. I mean, the data collection was always a big part of our business, but for as an industry, we didn't necessarily know what the hell to do with it all, right? And, I'm just so glad we were able to connect, because not only were you early in the data mining or understanding how we interact with the data, you're also incredibly passionate about securing it.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I hate to say it, Russell, but I've talked to some other data companies that securing, or I would say more abusing is probably the better term to
Yeah.
use. But I think for everybody out there that's watching and listening right now, before we really, because we're going to use the word data a lot in
Yeah.
today's
Yeah.
podcast.
It's going to
So
happen,
it's
right?
going to happen a lot. So maybe we should do like a little like data 101
Yeah.
explanation. You know, for
Yeah.
all the dealers out there that are watching, listening right now, Russell, like how do you define data to a dealership?
Yeah, so you're spot on about the data in the dealership. They're sitting on a gold mine when it comes to their transactional data, their customer history, everything that's in their DMS, and then the Rolodex, if you will, or the digital Rolodex. And I think there's a lot of confusion at times when you talk about different data sources. First party data, which is the data that the dealer has an interaction or a first party relationship with, and then third party, which is other data sources that they can use that are outside of their world or their realm, outside of their DMS, that either empowers their current data set, or it makes it actionable, or it hygienes it. So there's really kind of two worlds that the dealers need to be very versed in, which is their first party data and then third party data sets and how those data sets all interact. The second part of Data 101, definitely, as you pointed out, would be security. Um, from 1997, when we began, lead scrubbing and people putting in information on websites, there were no regulations governing consumer privacy.
No,
And it
not
was
at
not
all.
that anybody was doing anything wrong. It just really the industry hadn't seen a need for those kind of things. To date, everybody's familiar with CCPA, but CCPA is just because it's California and everybody, a lot of cars are sold out of California. But there are numerous other state laws and federal laws that regulate the use of this data. So the second thing that dealers should always be concerned about is not only the security of the data on behalf of their consumers, but applicable uses and how they can use the data effectively.
And I have to admit, as as a dealer body, I've had the opportunity to be in hundreds and hundreds, almost thousands of dealerships, during my career, is that they don't necessarily understand the security aspect of it. In fact, I've actually seen some pretty gross misusage of data where it's just literally being just emailed back and forth between providers that has transaction data and customer data. And I've seen finance data thrown in as an attachment in an email. And I'm just like, no, like, what are you doing? you know? But no, I think that's probably a whole nother podcast
Yeah,
around
data
data
security.
security.
Yeah, we did another one,
We
right?
could
So
literally just do a whole nother one there. But I'm glad you like. Thank you for the kind of that 101, because I think dealers kind of do need to understand that there is kind of when we're talking about data, there is different types of data that we're talking about. And let's talk about that. I guess the data for us is kind of our website. Our website data is a big one for us, right? And
yeah.
that seems to be in the news a lot right now. There's a
Mhm.
lot of things changing. Look, we're from a marketing perspective, and I've been on the marketing side of the business for a very long time. Our industry is pretty much built on a remarketing cookie strategy.
Yeah.
We'll kind of half-ass a ad out there to drive traffic to our site, but we don't necessarily worry so much about it because we're going to literally remarket to you thousands of times, hundreds of times over
Everywhere you go, you're going to see
everywhere you
our
go,
ad.
you're going to see it. And so, and that frequency is a great strategy. It makes sense. That's not a new strategy. That reach over frequency has been a strategy for a long time.
Absolutely.
But digitally, everything's changing. I mean, we're
Sure.
entering an era of I'm going to say cheap digital marketing is going away. So there are words being used out there like cookie apocalypse,
Yeah.
um, which I think you've been quoted saying once before, and the one I've heard recently was cookie war, and I don't think dealers necessarily understand when
Yeah.
they hear these things and what that impact can actually be on their on the marketing efforts that they typically have been doing for the last 7 to 10 years. So let's talk a little bit about that. How do you define the cookie apocalypse?
Yeah, so the cookie apocalypse is the fact that earlier we mentioned kind of the regulation changes and the way that data is used, harvested, leveraged, et cetera. And in recent years, especially over the last 24 months, the major browser providers out there, Chrome and Safari, have made significant changes that dramatically impact the ability for digital remarketers to use cookies to retarget individuals. So, taking a step back on the cookie piece, we've all become very comfortable with the fact that if I go to Jason Ford, and I'm looking at F-150 trucks. And I leave that website and I go over to Hilton Vacation Club, or I go to ESPN or ABC News. All of a sudden I see an ad pop up, and that's the digital retargeting. So there was a cookie, which is a piece of code that's been placed into my computer environment that allows that digital remarketer to identify me and re-engage me with ads. So that strategy is starting to go away because third-party cookies are going to become, obsolete, if you will, because Chrome and Safari are going to restrict the usage where third-party cookies aren't going to be available in those major browsers. So it's particularly the impact that's going to have on dealers and digital remarketers is that it's going to limit the audience for those anonymous, identifications and those redisplay of ads, which is that drip marketing that you mentioned that the dealers benefit from today. So, we mentioned about first-party data with the dealers. It's going to become more and more important that they own their own data, that they own their first party, they know who their audiences are, so that they can take those audiences and reload them into all the normal channels like Facebook and the other digital marketing platforms.
No, it is. I mean, we're going to have to. I think as an industry, we've been so focused on acquisition. Like we're constantly acquiring. Like the amount of money that we spend as an industry to acquire. And now we're going to have to kind of go back and say, you know what, that strategy has to change. I'm going to have to focus a lot more on the data that I have. I'm going to have to focus a lot more on the customers that I have. I'm actually totally okay with this, by the way. I actually see a lot of positive happening out of this. It's like I was with the dealer the other day. They're like, well, what does this mean? I'm like, well, you can't. You're like, we've already seen remarketing buckets go from here to here. In the last 6 months, like last 6-9 months. And, they're like, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm like, well, you're going to have to focus more on your existing customer database and how to utilize that database. But we've been, for such a long time, we've been so focused on just acquisition that now we actually have to actually kind of connect with the people that have transact with us in some way. Either they've gone to our website and filled out a form, or they've serviced with us, or they bought a part from us. And it's like, so I'm actually totally cool with this. The funny thing is, who's ultimately going to win here is just the marketing companies, the networks themselves, right? I mean, I love the fact that I'm like seeing all of these kind of press releases where or Facebook or Google, and they're just like, oh, we're sorry, guys. I know this sucks. And I'm thinking like, you guys are literally laughing in the background because you are going to make so much more money.
They're going to control the audiences at this point, right?
Exactly. I mean, think about that. I mean, for the last almost 3 years, I have been screaming on the top of my voice. All right, audience specific creative, audience specific targeting. You want to target that 45-year-old male who enjoys hunting and is a Packers fan, and you want to present them with a piece of creative that has that has those hobbies in it with a pickup truck. You're able to do that.
Yeah.
I can't now. It's like, so a lot, there's just been so many changes, but I think they're good changes. So I actually think it's a good thing for our industry moving forward. I'm curious to hear what you kind of think. Do you think this is a good thing or a bad thing kind of moving forward for our industry?
Yeah, so I think it's a good thing and a bad thing. I don't mean to be coy about it, but I think the good part of it is exactly what you said, which is it's going to create an awareness with dealers that says, listen, this is what we have to do. We have to focus on our existing database. Then we have to be very, very diligent with our offerings and our customer service and what we're putting out there to get new people into the funnel and then repeat that process over again. So that's the good part. I think it's going to be good for dealers. It's going to be painful to the remarketers, and particularly in this time with COVID. I mean, you mentioned about website traffic and stuff. I mean, e-commerce as a whole, not just in automotive, but website traffic, because of different various states, especially in the United States with lockdowns and stuff, is soaring, right? So you're having to get better with the ability of doing online chat and doing things through your website that becomes basically your virtual showroom. So that's going to be the good part for dealers. Agreed. The bad part is also what you just pointed out, which is it gives an immense amount of control to certain tech firms who control those audiences. So it looks like, unfortunately, I hope I don't upset too many people out there, but it looks like it's a good thing. It's on the basis of the consumers. It's really more like a boa constrictor because they're going to keep pulling those things in, and they do know who those audiences are. And it's a multi-billion dollars, particularly on the Google side of things for automotive advertising. So I think that's kind of the the bad part of it. Is it nefarious? No, I mean it's commerce, it's capitalism, but it definitely is not powered 100% in the best interest of the consumer, I guess, is my view.
Well, not only the best interest of the consumer, but not also the best interest of the dealer, right? I
Exactly.
mean, I,
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, think about this. We're talking right now. We're talking about just the beginning war. This is like the first war. The cookie war is
Yeah.
the first war, right?
Yeah.
What's going to end up happening over the next 3 to 5 years is we're going to call it the algorithm war. All
Hmm.
right, and it's
Yeah.
who has the better algorithm.
That's great. I
Who
like that one. Can I use that one?
100%, please.
Okay.
Because it's what it is, right? It's and,
Yeah.
and you know what the funny thing? It's no longer Google and Facebook that are necessarily going to provide all these algorithms, right?
Right.
You got Car Gurus, you got Auto Trader, you got these big marketplaces that are collecting a tremendous amount of behavioral data around the people that are interacting with them, and they're creating their own algorithms and they're creating their own uh, third party ones. That one actually drives me a little bit nuts. I've been warned to watch what I say around some of those names, but yes, the only reason those third party market or the third party those marketplaces have that data is because as dealers we're willing to actually put our inventory. We actually pay to put our inventory on there. So
So
not
the
only do we
imagery is the content, right? I mean, that's what the eyeballs want to see. So
exactly.
it's the monetization of the dealer's inventory that he floor plans. He controls the pictures and the reason, and that's what drives the traffic, right?
Yeah, I mean, literally, the dealers are what created these marketplaces. But
Yes.
now these marketplaces have gotten so big for their britches that they feel like they're going to control the market. It's like, no, 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 no. All right. The only reason you exist is because as a dealer, all right, the time, the money, the effort I put into merchandising my inventory, buying my inventory, pricing my inventory, describing my inventory, all right, I gifted that and actually paid you to do that. And now you're actually going to, so wait, so this is the part where I get really kind of antsy on these, and I'll digress in a minute. But it's like so as a dealer, I paid to put my data on your site, and then you're going to resell me that data back.
Yeah. When
And
somebody responds to the merchandise that I'm putting forth, right? Wow, what a deal.
I just, there's one little side of my brain that's like, damn, good for
Yeah. Yeah.
you. Because what
Yeah.
a hell of a business model, right? Then the other
Yeah.
side of my brain is like, F you, like, come on, don't do like it's doing this to dealers. And I think that kind of goes into like, kind of our next topic is like, how do dealers, control their own data? I mean, this is a big topic. I mean, there's lawsuits going on right
Mhm.
now about this.
Right.
Have been going on for actually, gosh, how long has that suit been going on right now with Reynolds?
That's late 2015.
Right?
I think it started. It was filed in late 2015 with two of the largest DMS providers in the space. Yeah.
You know what? For everybody out there that's listening and watching, and maybe don't know kind of the context behind that, maybe could you give us kind of a brief explanation of what's going on there?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. So as I indicated at the top of the show, originally when I made the transition from AutoWeb and AutoVitel in the lead space, I was involved in the foundation of some companies that started data syndication. So a lot of the providers that we're talking about right now require that data to be moved from one spot to another on behalf of the dealer out of their DMS system, whether it's inventory or it's their service data or whatever, to give into third parties so that they can reuse that data on behalf of the dealer, right? So those platforms, the dealers, as we know, and most of the audience knows, DMS, dealer management systems. There's
Mm-hmm.
several companies in the space. In particular, there's two or three big ones. And the battle has been over the years of the control of the data on behalf of the dealers. And it's always been my humble opinion and the people I surround myself with that the dealers own this dealer. It's their data that they are syndicating for their use and that they
100%.
should be in total control of it. So at the heart of this lawsuit, this was that two of the larger DMS companies were actually worked together to impact the dealer's ability to use other services in the market space to do it cheaper and more effective. They just basically removed their choice. So it
Yep.
turned out being an antitrust case.
And you know what drives me absolutely nuts is that, it's a DMS. It's a data management software. We pay them. We pay them. And you know what? As a dealer, I didn't pay a little. I paid a lot. And,
Mm-hmm.
we pay, I mean, millions and hundreds of millions of dollars a year for these companies to manage our data, then they have the audacity to dictate to us how the hell we can use it?
Exactly. And it's a platform to print contracts. It's a platform to send information to banks. It's a platform to intake inventory and then sell to customers and collect credit cards for service transactions. So everything that happens at the core of that platform, the fuel for that platform is the data that the dealer puts in. Just like what you mentioned on the inventory, it's a merchandising system, right? So those cars, I would not go to those inventory third-party sites unless I was looking for that vehicle or that truck or that sport utility. If they didn't have that, they wouldn't have the traffic. So it really all kind of, maybe or you and I are very passionate about this, but it all really boils down to the fact that at the heart of all of this is the dealers, right? They should be at the center of this universe, and everything else should work in conjunction with supporting that star of the program, if you will.
I 100% with you, but then I like, as a dealer, I was a dealer principal. You look at these companies, we're talking DMS, we're talking marketplaces, anybody that wants to kind of manage your data for you.
Right.
And then Russell, I mean, you've seen these data compliancy policies or these policy data agreements. I mean, they're insane.
They are.
And they're 37 pages long with language that is never used in the dealer world. And I hate to say it, but I could probably, I don't know if I can count on two hands if I know one dealer that's actually read their data agreement from a DMS or from a marketplace recently. So then that kind of begs the question, like, as dealers, like, how do we control, our own data? Like, how do we take that back? And I know you got some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I mean, for the dealers, it is getting a little better than it used to be for the dealers. But you're absolutely right; these agreements traditionally have been written in a format that protected the technology from breaches and all this other kind of stuff. When at the end of the day, there's just as much liability for the dealer as it is for the platform. So they have to make sure that they have certain provisions in place. It is getting better for them. Some of these agreements are becoming more mutual in nature just because of the upcries. There's been a lot of litigation in certain states where dealer associations and the state have banded together to put certain things in place that required certain procedures. So then the technology companies and the marketing companies had to conform if they were going to do business in those states. So those are all good things. But from a dealer perspective, I think that there's 2 to 3 things that are absolute that have to be etched in stone for them. And they have to have awareness and reporting of who has access to the system at all times. So, if there's a third party being bolted on or bolted off, they have to understand, how that data is being accessed, who sees that data, where's that data going, and so that gatekeeper is the biggest thing for a dealership. The second part would be is that just everybody says more data is better or big data, and we throw all these buzzwords and things around. Yeah. But honestly, there's not a lot of use for some of the data elements that the dealer has to collect that you don't really need to remarket and retarget from, and they're exposure points for you. So just make sure you limit your access to individuals to have that, or not even have it in those systems, or make sure that the data dictionary and the data that's coming in and out of the system with your partners doesn't include those elements. And those elements are pretty self-evident. We want to protect anything that's identified as, social security numbers and date of births and things that would be problematic for a consumer if those systems were breached.
100%. I mean, I just saw, I just read a data agreement right now for a new marketplace that's coming up. And one of my dealer clients reached out to me and go, "Hey, have you heard about these guys?" I'm like, kind of, but I think they're pretty small. He goes, "Well, I'm going to start syndicating some of my stuff to them." I said, "Well, send me over the agreement because it's free, right?" I don't think anybody understands that nothing's free. Do you know what I mean?
Free apps, right? People don't realize when they download the app and you click the side of your phone and you get that 99-cent app, it's free. It's not free.
There's nothing free, right? So the second he told me, I'm like, no, like nothing's free. Send me over the agreement. I'll just take a quick glance at it. And sure enough, in the agreement, it clearly stated that the company was going to resell the data out to other companies because that's how they're going to make it. I mean, Facebook is the perfect example of this.
Facebook
at one point,
probably the premier example of it.
It is
and
a premier, right?
When you think back, it's hard for the dealers to think back now, but Facebook, it was weird. I mean, here was this social marketplace or social community for people to go to and do things. And all of a sudden we're typing in keywords like, hey, I was down at Five Guys Burgers and it was a terrific sandwich. And hey, I'm going to go pick up my new car this weekend at Gentry Ford and do this. And every one of those keywords, as weird as it sounds, becomes a monetized piece of actionable data on the behalf of that consumer, right?
Yep.
So now all of a sudden we can start indexing, or they started indexing that data, and that's what allows them, you mentioned it before, to build algorithms for retargeting.
Yep.
And it turned into a multi-billion-dollar industry. That's what they survive on. So nothing is free. Sure, we get to go on there and post our birthday photos and your vacation to Tahoe and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, all the rest of it under those agreements, those end user agreements, is being utilized for retargeting and for marketing.
It is. I mean, I just recently downloaded a new fitness app, right? I got my new watch.
Yeah.
I'm defining the process. I'm committing to the goal. I'm gonna lose
And of
that
course,
weight,
you've got
right?
the appropriate accessory band for it that
Oh
fits the
yes, I
theme.
know. You know what? They know me, right? Like, I mean, I think I saw an ad for an orange one. So either it was really good retargeting or it was total serendipity. But I was like, okay, I don't even know which one that is, but that's the one I want. So I'll take that one. But
Yeah.
like when I was downloading the app, it actually had an option of a free option or a $69.99 option. And I'm like, okay, what's the difference? And sure enough, it was the data.
Yeah.
It was how
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
data was being, like, in the free option, my data was being shared with other companies within the fitness space so that they can target me and sell me protein powders or athletic wear or something along that lines, right? And so, like, of course, I had no problem with it. I just want to pay the $70. I don't really care, right?
That's right. But
But
there's two models to your point,
yes,
right? So that model you pay up and the data is shared, and then the other model is that when you're going to that behavior and everything else is allowed to use in an anonymous fashion for retargeting, right? So both those are monetization structures that these platforms use. Again, it's not that it ever became nefarious. It's just that so much of this data with the Internet of Things and watches and phones and laptops and iPads, all of it with that interconnectivity, there's a lot of data that goes back and forth. And that, I think that's the key part for the dealers is that this is a very, very good moment in time for them. This allows them, empower their data, to allow them to serve their customers in the best way they can, being very intuitive. Service menu schedules, everything that they would need to communicate with the customer wants to know. Let's make sure that data powers those things, right?
for sure. Actually, I got to be honest with you. There is some elements that I'm actually super excited about. Like, I've been
Oh
reading a
yeah.
lot on vehicle connectivity.
Hmm.
And I mean, the cars now they're just driving around smartphones,
Yeah.
and the amount of data. Now, I mean, very soon, your car's going to come with a data agreement.
Hmm.
And there might actually be an associated discount depending if you agree to the data agreement or you don't agree with the data agreement, right?
The insurance companies are doing that today,
Well,
right? So
that's a
they're
good
already doing
point.
the amount of time you drive the car and the way that you drive the car. If you're willing to share that with the insurance company, it comes with associated discounts. And Jason, that's a perfect example right there of what you bring up of how the data is used for good purposes, right? I mean, let's make sure that we leverage those things. It doesn't always have to be doom and gloom and nefarious, you know?
And that's why I kind of wanted to bring it up, right? Because I think a lot of times when we have conversations around data, it can easily become a very
It's
negative.
scary,
Yeah,
you know? Yeah.
and it's very Big Brother, and it's like, oh, someone's watching us. But look, these vehicles and their level of connectivity are actually just going to provide a much better experience, and it's going to give the manufacturers the data so that can be passed on to the dealers to handle that better experience, right? Like, a dealership's
Exactly.
going to know, if this car's having tranny issues without the customer even picking up the phone call and saying that something feels weird, right? Like, that's a great experience. I mean, think about that. If I had a phone call right now, and my Armada outside is having transmission issues, how cool would it be? I think every Armada is having transmission issues, anyways. But how an amazing experience. All right, a data-driven amazing experience. If the dealer called me and said, "Hey Jay, your car told us that there's something between gear 1 and gear 2. It seems to be slipping right around 1100 RPMs. We want you to come in and we're going to take a look at it." Like, as a consumer, I would be
You got
like,
it,
how
man.
cool is that? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
my dealer, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, look, I definitely think we talk about data, and there's just a lot of exciting things that are on the horizon with that. Let's go.
Jason, if I could real
Yes,
quick, I
please.
just so to that point, this is a really cool thing that, to your point about leveraging the data that we think, and is yet another example of how the consumers. So one of the models that we've recently worked on and built in the service side of things for dealers, it's a very traditional calendar-based model. So every 6 months you get a coupon for the cabin filter. You have change your oil. It's all built off the OEM service menu schedules that say it's all time-based, right? By taking a lot of this data that we're able to harness from the location-based intelligence data set, the dealers are able to communicate to the consumers in a much more effective way based on their mileage, right? So instead of just getting it every 6 months and they are all of a sudden they're a 22,000 mile a month customer, they're getting those communications, like you said, from the dealership in a much more curated, focused way that's helpful to the consumer. So that's, just real quickly, sorry, another example of how the data can be used for good.
And honestly, I think that's like someone asked me the other day what excites me right now in the tech side in the automotive space, and that was the example. That's what came up. I was actually talking to a very large U.S. automotive group recently that those little nods that we were talking about that insurance companies are using. All right, they're ordering them from China for like 18, $22 a piece, sticking them in their dealers' cars or into their customers' cars and collecting, the mileage information, the hours on the engine, just not a whole lot, about 5 or 7 different points of information, but enough information that they can just provide a much better experience, right?
Right.
So,
That's right.
The customer pulls up, I know that they pulled up. I go out. I just don't go, hey, you're welcome here you're here for your service appointment. It's like, no, hey, Mr. Johnson, it's good to see you. We're glad you came by, right? Like we know these things. So data can be used to provide amazing customer experiences. I'm curious, and I like that actually. Let's roll with that. I want to go one little step farther. I'm sure that you probably had some great data experience or data-driven experiences. Can you give me an example or two of a data-driven experience that you've had?
Yeah, so my partner and I, we're a South Florida-based company, so we're in Fort Lauderdale, and a lot of our clients love to come to South Florida, particularly if they're in the colder parts of the country when we're meeting with them, et cetera. And so we, have a lot of restaurants that we take clients to and that type of thing. And there is one particular restaurant here in Fort Lauderdale that as soon as we check in at the hostess stand, they've got your cell phone number, it's tied into their database, and they have a lot of preferences already set up. For example, they'll say, oh, Mr. Gentry, the last 2 times you've been out here, you've sat out on the patio. It's a little cooler tonight. Do you still want to sit out on the patio? Or would you like to have indoor seating? And it would also say, hey, Mr. Gentry, last time you were here, you had a particular bottle of wine for the table. Would you like us to go ahead and place that order while we're getting you seated? So it's that customization that where you walk right up to the creepy line with the consumer, but don't step over it. That excites me, right? It makes my life more full, and it makes things easier. That's what the data, for me, that's an exciting thing.
And it does. It excites the customer. I remember I pulled into a hotel last year, same thing. And I didn't even think about it, but when I was setting up the hotel, it did ask me for the make of my car and my license plate. I just assumed it was for parking purposes, right? And later on, I realized what it was. When I pulled up, they put my plate number into the computer, and they knew my name. So they came and opened the door, and they're like, "Hey, Mr. Harris, welcome back." And I'm like,
exactly,
and it took me a little while to figure out how they connected the dots, and then I realized I had put my plate number in, but it was a simple usage of data, but an incredibly impactful experience when someone opened that door and was like, "Hey, welcome back, Mr. Harris." And I was just like, "Oh, that's pretty cool," right?
Yeah. And we've used, there's been a lot of cases. There's a lot of, back to the data 101 piece real quickly, there's a lot of talk out there. We use the word DMS or data management system or dealer management system for the tier 3 automotive. But, we are blessed to work in a lot of industries, hospitality, RV, marine, power sports. And there's a lot of talk out there today of CDPs or customer data platforms, which is the central environment that you speak of that takes multiple data elements in, whether it's from a transactional basis of the consumer, whether it's third-party data where it's collected, but it's permissible use to attach it to that, or it's the behavioral stuff, right? And when that stuff is all centralized, it's indexed, it's given consistent ID measures, it can be leveraged exactly like you say, and it can be for the good of the customer. And there's loyalty club programs and all this kind of stuff. that program, those programs have always, Jason, been there for years, even back in the early days, like we were talking about with the lead
Oh,
programs.
for sure.
But it's been with the technology and the leveraging and being able to visualize the data, being able to access the data. That was all very, very expensive back then. I remember, the original AOL discs that when dealers would get onto the AutoWeb program, we'd go to the to the store and they get that yellow disc and the modem, and that's how they would log in and get their leads. Now it's just a foregone conclusion that they can get them right off their phone, right? So,
I actually worked at a Radio Shack. I'm dating
oh, there
myself
you go,
now.
yeah.
And
Well, they were right there by
that
the
was
cash
it was
register,
right next
right?
to the
They're on the
cash
little button.
register. It was a hot seller. It
Yeah.
was AOL disc. Gosh, man, yeah, I remember those days. Those were fun.
I don't know
But
if this is so good though. It's really dating everything at this point, right?
I
So,
know, right? I was kind of thinking a little bit, kind of going back to that cookie war conversation we were having.
yeah,
Um, there's another element to the marketing side that I wanted to ask you. A couple of questions I want to ask you, kind of go back to that is how does this affect kind of agency ad word, or ad waste? Agency ad waste. And,
mhm,
how does this kind of affect, kind of our geofencing efforts? Because
yeah,
I think what it is that if dealers haven't done it yet, starting in 2021, we have to revamp our entire digital strategy. I mean, I think a lot of dealers just kind of they hear bits and pieces and then they just kind of go, my agency will take care of it. I'm surprised to find out not a lot of people are having these discussions and making these adjustments. So, how does something like this affect agency ad waste? First of all, I guess we can define that. And then also, how does that affect, our oh so popular geofencing efforts?
yeah. So the ad waste piece, and I think you're right. I mean, it's kind of like this. Some people talk about it, but not nearly as many as you would think would
Hmm.
want to have insight into it and that type of thing. Unfortunately, and anybody that knows myself and my partner Greg and the things that we work on, we're very, very big into identity resolution and making sure that first off, the ad is being displayed through the agency to a human being and not a bot, right? And then the second part is that it's really that human being and they're in the DMA or they're within the dealership's geographic region. So it's making it's a purposeful communication. It's not just
Yep.
being wasted, right? So the geofencing piece of it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of you used it when we were chatting offline about the wild wild west, and that's what happens is there's a
Yep.
large percentage of this traffic through digital display it's just not accountable, and it's not human beings, it's not in the DMA, so there's a big spend, waste spend there. The third party cookie and the anonymization of that data allows that to kind of happen, and the dealers can't really tell that it's Russ or it's Jason, it's George
Yep.
or it's Betty. So, this switch away from those cookies where it's just blind retargeting and getting over to custom audience data sets and owning your first party data and knowing who those audiences are is going to raise the level of accountability. So I think
Agreed.
by default, it's going to decrease, the digital waste, and it's going to be much more effective communications. I mean, we are, in a very self-serving manner. I mean, we are away from the cookie retargeting, away from the IP retargeting, away from HTML5 retargeting, because of all the vulnerabilities of those to be inaccurate, not be in the right geo, that type of thing. So the tech and the data that we work on, in particular, like with our Smart Pixel product, doesn't use cookies to retarget. It definitely identifies or de-anonymizes the person that goes to the website, so the dealer knows it's Russ or it's Jason.
So it's identifying the individual, not the device.
Exactly. It uses innocuous
Sense.
elements in a compliant first-party manner, clear and conspicuous choice for the consumer. So it takes those elements from the device, it moves it over, but then it aligns it with what we talked about, these offline
Hmm.
data sources. And it gives the dealer a wealth of information, up to 306 data attributes that the dealer can use to create, like you said, these custom experiences for these consumers.
And I love the US for that, right?
Yeah,
And
you talk. Yeah,
it's in Canada, it gets very tricky because of our communication policies. We have this
yeah,
thing called castle compliancy, which pretty much states if I actually haven't had a documented transaction with the individual in the last 18 months, then I cannot communicate with them, right? At least not directly communicate. So that you can indirectly communicate, which Facebook still has that option, so that's great. But yeah, you know what? I think the bottom line is coming into 2021, if you haven't had the conversation with your agency, you got to have the conversation with your agency now because so many things have changed. And we're just talking about data and targeting data, but hell, we haven't talked about some of the other kind of compliances like HEC. It's like being credit compliant now with it. That's a big hit for us in the automotive industry because
Yep.
we rely on putting the interest rates and payments and
Yeah.
things like that out there. So there's a lot has changed for this year. If you're out there, you're watching, listening, you got to have a conversation around your agency. I actually had one more question for you because I'm looking at your background right now, which I love. I'm a
Thank you.
huge the Marvel Universe fan, and then of course with Star Wars, over the holidays, my boys have just kind of gotten to that age where they got Star Wars Legos for Christmas. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
I've been able to kind of walk them back through that saga. I've been able to kind of go through the saga again. We got totally hooked on Mandalorian.
Oh,
And,
yeah, I love it.
I mean,
Yeah,
right? I mean, just actually, I
yeah.
got to be honest with you, better than some of the movie pieces they've ever put out.
I agree. I agree.
But I am so insanely impressed with Disney Plus, and I'm watching it and how it's working. And it's like over the holidays they like gifted us a movie, because we were early on in the platform, and I'm just like going, wow, this is so cool. But the data that they're collecting is really something else, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity for dealers more so in the States. It's developing in Canada, but I'm kind of get your thoughts if you've played or if you talked about kind of, kind of OTT level kind of marketing and data understanding. And because I think that's where our next opportunity, if I was going to, if someone say, hey, look, Jay, our current, digital marketing efforts are going to go up, up, up. Where's the next sandbox I can go play in that I don't think will take it will take longer for everyone to jump into. And I feel like that's OTT. I'm curious to kind of get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that because we're a huge fan of it from a data perspective for
Hmm.
exactly the reasons that you indicated. OTT, and for the audience, the dealers and the others listening, OTT or connected TV is the ability to actually display ads in a very, very curated, focused way to a subscriber because of the information that's exchanged in a compliant fashion with the streaming service, the device. Roku's advertising
Yep.
platform is probably one of the largest in the country from a market share standpoint, but Disney Plus, Amazon, all of them have that ability. From a dealer's perspective, we think it's probably one of the greatest areas of opportunity for a dealer.
I
We
agree.
already see it, and we have a relationship in the RV side of the business that has done exactly that. Because so many of these RV enthusiasts, when they travel in their units across the country, they're streaming to devices, they're using the internet because they don't have a cable connection, et cetera. But that ability to curate a message to an individual and know that it's going very specifically to an audience through the OTT connected TV is very, very, very powerful to a
Yes.
dealer.
And I think for a lot of dealers out there, I've actually had this conversation. I'm like, look, I'm not gonna we're not gonna talk ad spend or budgets yet or creative strategies yet, but it's a discussion, and and I'm pushing my clients to do a little research. Like the best client, I'm sure for you, the best clients too are the educated client, right? The more that they kind of understand, the better that we can kind of engage back and forth and challenge each other back and forth as far as the strategies and the creative that we're putting out there. And I think that a lot of dealers don't even know they can participate in some of
Yeah.
these OTT platforms, and they are still pretty new. I agree with you. Roku, I think they crushed it. In fact, actually, I think they're probably going to be used. I wish there was more around it. Like I feel like I almost want to be a part of the PR department there because I don't feel like they've done a good enough job of identifying the verticals that will actually use it
Right.
and
Yeah.
go and really kind of dive into it because my dealers don't even know. I mean, I could probably talk to 20 dealers and maybe one might necessarily
Yeah.
have some idea of what I'm talking about. But I think what's to come over the next few years, like when Disney Plus puts out their marketing product, right? When
Oh,
Netflix
Disney
puts out
Plus is going to have an ad platform, and we all
oh
realize that and know that. There's no doubt about it. I mean, so much of their revenue stream that comes in the corporation itself is through branding and marketing and merchandising, that type of thing. So the fact that I saw a graphic, or actually I posted a graphic too, on the amount of market share that Disney Plus has grabbed, and then it forecasted where they would go in compared to a Netflix and some of the other streaming services is phenomenal. And I would argue to a dealer but that's a great example to use the Disney methodology of merchandising your vehicle. To your point about those
yes,
sites that have your
100%.
cars and this and that, the consumers need to interact with the dealer. The dealer needs to control his content, his messaging, and his audience.
And I tell you what excites me even more so is because we're such a large creative department. that, it's only taken 10 years for our
Yeah.
industry to understand and embrace creative, because it's so easy just to throw an image of a car out there with a $160 biweekly payment and say, oh, it's good enough, and that's not necessarily the case. Like the consumer is going to start demanding better creative, better messaging, and then the platforms themselves are going to demand better creative, better messaging. So I'm actually excited. I think the next 3 to 5 years, and I'm glad we had a chance to kind of jam about that. Hell, that could have been an entire podcast actually, just on itself.
Yeah.
Um,
So now we have security, and now we'll go back to connected TV at some point as well, right? So,
then the whole loop kind of starts all over again. Look, I
right.
know, we're getting towards the tail end of our time today, Russell, and this has been a lot of fun, and we gotta definitely do this again for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hopefully someday in person.
Yeah. Well, the world's changing. I think it's going for the better. I'm going to keep a positive outlook.
Yeah,
So,
me too. Me too. For everyone out there watching, listening, Russell, and would love to connect with you and kind of follow along with you and your company's journey, what's the best way to do so?
yeah. So the best way to do so is our website, which is m1data.com, and then hashtag m1data.com, or I'm sorry, m1data. All of the content on the offerings and the programs and the things that we're working on is there. We'd love to engage with individuals. We do a lot of testing for free and a lot of business visualizations, a lot of case study information. We've got a lot of success with clients that we like to share with other verticals. So we'd love to hear from you and just kind of, like Jason said, jam about what's all possible with data. We love data.
And I love the fact that you're just so approachable. Like we connected online on LinkedIn, and it was just like, yeah, man, let's do this. let's
Go.
let's
Let's
do
talk
this.
about this stuff. Yeah. I think
Uh,
we actually had to trim our list down, didn't we? We were
we
trying to.
did. I think we probably had about, like I said, I think there's going to be another part to this for sure, because I think there's just so much more. And then it's actually, this year's going to be so interesting because I find, we're going to go 6 months into this year, and I just feel that, again, we're going to have this fundamental shift
Yeah.
in of course in data and marketing, and it's just, look, it's a great time to
Well,
be in the
think
business.
about the one thing. I know we're coming to the end, but think about the one thing when we talked about digital fencing with lockdowns in the state of
Exactly.
California or the other states, varying by state on what the regulations are, up in Canada as well, and what the
Hmm.
regulations there are. But a traditional methodology would have been for somebody that sells purple sweaters to target the black sweater company or the green sweater company, and that foot traffic's not there right now. So the shift for these brands to capture and engage their website traffic, understand who's visiting their website, how they can best curate the message back to them is going to be key this
You
year.
you know what? And that's, look, I hate to identify a silver lining, during times like this, but if there is a silver lining, that's definitely one of them. Is, as an industry, look, we've built these multi-million dollar Taj Mahals,
Yeah.
of physical buildings. And not saying all dealers, but a good chunk of our industry has treated the digital version of their dealership in as not nearly as important. In fact, actually probably pretty low on the totem pole. You know,
Yeah.
that's not the case anymore.
No.
The consumer now demands a much better digital dealership experience. And I actually think, it's funny. I think we come out of this, and I think a lot of things could shift in our industry. I mean, do we really need to be building, 30, $40 million buildings? Do
Yeah.
we? Do we
Well,
need
we both know there's models out there right now that allow you to
the
buy your car
UK?
online and
Yeah.
have it dropped in your driveway, right? So,
The UK has shown that. There's several models in the States that are showing that. I still like that place where you can go visit, but if you look in the UK, they're small little boutique places.
yeah.
They're in shopping malls and strip malls, and they're 22,000 square feet or 1,800 square feet, showrooms. That's it. Anyways,
Right on.
that's probably a whole nother topic. We could probably do that one another time. But
Yeah.
Russell, thank you so much for taking the time to jam with me today. This has been a ton of fun. You have yourself an amazing day.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Strategy Mob podcast with your host, Jason Harris. Don't want to miss new content? Be sure to sign up to be a mobster at strategymob.com to stay in the know. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe.